Picture this, it's Friday night in the early 90s, you and the gang are getting ready for a big, glorious night out, and you decide to freshen up your breath with some radiation toothpaste, and maybe after that, remove some of those unwanted hairs with a giant x-ray machine that'll in turn kill you. What better way to loosen up? If you want to feel good, you gotta look good, apparently. What's happening, most amazing squad, and welcome back. I'm your host, Taylor McWaters, and here are our top 10 dark radioactive products sold in history. Let's do it. Kicking off the list at number 10, Doramad Toothpaste. With charcoal toothpaste being more popular nowadays, we have to kick this list off with possibly the worst toothpaste to ever exist. Doramad. Accelerate your breath. Gross. Yeah, so back in the 40s, people were brushing with radiation. Even on the actual tube, it says its radioactive ingredients increase the defense of teeth and gums. The cells are loaded with new life energy, and the bacteria is therefore hindered in their destroying effect, leaving behind a pleasant, mildly refreshing taste. Yummy. Its radioactivity was low in comparison, but the fact that this once existed, compared to what you're about to hear on this list, is so wild to me. Good gums don't bleed, they actually glow. Who knew? Number 9, radioactive water. Nothing quenches your thirst more than some radium water. And you thought Dasani tastes bad, buckle up. Back in 1932, Edmund Byers, 51-year-old steel manufacturer and golf pro, met his fate in a horrible way. He was told to drink this product by his physiotherapist. He said that drinking this product would help the golfer's arm pain and fatigue. Each of these bottles contained 1 microgram of radium and 1 microgram of isothorium mixed with water. The guy would drink radiation after every single meal, and subsequently he lost weight and developed bone necrosis in his jaw. He lost several teeth before his jaw literally fell apart. Number 8. Radia. If somebody told you your face was glowing back in the late 30s, that would be the highest compliment of all time. Radia was a beauty product company that made radioactive creams, powders, lipstick, anything to get your glam on, really. They took pride in using thorium and radium lead to tone facial tissues, remove wrinkles, and all that jazz. And the product was doing so well it actually circulated in Italy, Portugal, Romania, Egypt, Belgium, and France. It wasn't until 1937 until the French government caught on to these side effects. So the radium would literally make your skin glow a bit, which is great, but then after you might die in the long-term effects. I'm glad this didn't stick around. Imagine Jennifer Aniston using this. It's kind of hard to do a Friends reboot without a jaw. Number 7, toys. This holiday season, here's a fun playset to absolutely avoid. The Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab toy set sounds fun, I guess, when you say it out loud, and it looks quite fun upon first glance, but when the company released this kit back in 1950, it was all but games. Gilbert, who was a successful toy maker, businessman, even magician, believed that his line of work should be fun, yet informative. He was nicknamed the man who saved Christmas after he convinced the US Council of National Defense to not ban toy purchases during World War I around the holiday season. He was a big deal, and he meant well. This set was around $50, which back in the day was actually quite a lot. The price was justified apparently, as the set was, well, actually radioactive. And that wasn't even the reason it had been discontinued, believe it or not. They actually stopped making them because they were just too expensive. Now, the Atomic Energy Lab contained this cloud chamber where you can actually see alpha particles traveling at 12,000 miles a second. Imagine asking for a light bright and then you open this. I'd rather find cool. I think I'd rather find cool. Number 6. Watches. New Jersey, 1916. When a factory opened its doors and hired 70 women, the first employees out of 1,000, it was considered a well-paid job. This was a big deal. The job was simple and some would say artistic. These women would apply small amounts of radiated paint to these tiny dials so you could see the time, day or night. They were told to point the brushes with their lips, and if you're already sensing a pattern here, things are about to get a whole lot worse for these ladies. Later known as the Radium Girls, it took years for these long-term side effects to take place. The company told the girls that the paint was harmless. Of course they did. These poor ladies were literally poisoning themselves on the clock. Now eventually these women started to suffer from burns, ulcers, and horrible aches with their jawbones too starting to dissolve. This is extremely sad, and a side effect from working here was that all this radioactive dust would fill the air. So these ladies loved their job. They actually wore their good dresses to work in hopes that it would maintain this radioactive shine when they got home. Horrible. Number 5, the tricho system. Instead of plucking your eyebrows before prom, if it was still the 1920s, you would ideally want to use the tricho system to remove those unwanted hairs. This device was booming in the 20s. Hair salons had to have this thing. By 1925, there were over 75 systems installed in beauty shops, and what you would do is sit at this large desk, face this small window for a few minutes, and then boom, you're beautiful. Just like that after 20 treatments of this. It's not that fast of a system. But then you'd be beautiful, so I mean, I guess 20 visits makes sense. They used X-ray technology on their faces way back in the day. So in 1929, tricho problems were on the rise. Ulcers, carcinoma, keratosis, death. This was not the solution you wanted. Just do this, just pluck everything. Even get some tape, scotch tape, anything's better than that. Don't do that. Number 4, fluoroscope. Overpronation, low arches, a little bit of radiation, Dr. Scholl's can certainly help with that. A proper measurement of the foot is the first step to a healthier lifestyle. If you're off by a half size in either width or length, you're setting yourself up for future problems. I worked at New Balance, trust me, I know what I'm talking about. So when x-rays started being used to properly measure up the family foot sizes in stores, it sounded like an ideal start to an otherwise exhausting process. This began in the 1920s and everybody used these things. Adult, kids, it didn't even matter. It was completely normal. By the time the 40s rolled around, scientists were concerned about the radiation level emitting off of these machines. Eventually, and thankfully, they were banned. The little thing we use today is so annoying, like with it's always so cold too when you're measuring your foot. You're like, 11, I'm 11, stop. Also wrong foot. Number 3, chocolate. Halloween is right around the corner, so what better time to mention the spookiest chocolate of all time. Burke and Braun's Radium chocolate. Doesn't that sound appetizing off the bat? These delights were sold between 1931 to 1936, and it was praised for the effect that it had on consumers. Instead of getting a tummy ache after downing some of Burke and Braun's chocolate, you would feel rejuvenated. Nice. The chocolate was made in that radium water that I mentioned earlier with the golfer and the arm stuff, so you know it's gonna be bad news real soon. Of course, as time went on, these horror stories started to get out. Folks decided, you know what, maybe eating radium chocolate wasn't a good idea. Who knew? Besides, mini eggs are also way better. I'll eat 1,000 of those and definitely feel rejuvenated. That's for sure. Number 2, antiques. So we heard the horrors that came to be after the radium gals were told that it was safe to lick radiated paintbrush, which is a horrible idea. So when we talk about clocks or other antiques, the same concerns come to mind. We needed a way to tell the time in the dark, be it on a wristwatch or in our homes. And back then we didn't know how to do it without these radioactive materials. When radium was first discovered in the early 1900s, its natural glow was used in many more ways. During World War II, for example, radium dials were used to allow pilots to fly at night without using bright cockpit lights. It's like when you're driving and you turn on the light and your dad's like, oh my god! We have to avoid that, we'll have glow in the dark dials instead of clicking things and crashing. Uranium was also used to give jewelry those yellow, green, or orange colors. And for many years, glass makers used a very small amount of uranium to make their glass green or yellow, which is wild to me because radiation or not, those aren't flattering colors. Have some company over, you're like, oh, let me just grab my Mountain Dew stained wine glass. Here you go, ma'am, cheers. And finally, number 1. Vita Radium Suppositories. With guaranteed real radium, yes, the home product company of Denver, Colorado, it's next to Colorado, it has a V, they're cooler. With guaranteed real radium, the home product company of Denver, Colorado came out with these suppositories back in 1930, and the way that they marketed these things, let me just read it out to you. It's just utterly insane to look back on. The company reached out and says, weak, discouraged men. Yes, if you are showing signs of slowing up in your actions and duties, perhaps if you have begun to lose your charm, your personality, your normal manly vigor, then certainly you want to stage a comeback. The man who had lost these precious attributes of youth knows how to appreciate their value. He realizes that happiness depends on his ability to perform the duties of a real man. Sweet, glorious pleasures of life. Nature intended that you should enjoy them, and now is the time to act. Then they put radiation right up their That's the plan. The initial goal here was to, of course, feel better, but instead of waking up a new man feeling refreshed, users eventually stopped waking up in general. Also, what an insane marketing ad. They're like, hey, are you a real man? Radiation, come check it out. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Those were just 10 dark radioactive products that we actually used on the daily back in the day. I can't believe people would brush your teeth with radiation toothbrush. That's the most crazy thing I've ever heard in my life. Like the charcoal people, I was like, oh, it's weird. Now I'm like, you know what? Way better idea. I've been your host, Taylor McWaters, and we'll see you next time on Most Amazing Top 10. See ya. Number 6, watches. Always at the 6. A little sip for number 6. Radium. Vigor, right? Vigor, yeah. Vigor. Now that sounds weird. Sounds like a monster. This is Vigor. He's like, I'll talk about that. Marketing ad. They're like, hey, are you a real man? Radiation, come check it out. That's so stupid. I'm walking off again, Chris. That's how you know I'm comfortable.